Hello, my name is Brian Berry and this is The Power of One. Thank you for watching today. Our program is focused on that one person can make a difference and they make a difference all the time in our community. So my guest today is Tom Coston, the President, Chief Merrymaker, head honcho
I like that better.
of the Lightbringer Project. So thank you for being here today, Tom.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you for giving me the title Chief Merrymaker of the Pasadena community.
Yeah,
I accept that gladly.
Yeah, well, someone has to do it.
That's right. It's very important.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people are unaware of what the Lightbringer Project is.
Sure.
And so could you take a minute and why Lightbringer?
Why is it?
I mean, it makes sense, sort of, but...
Yeah. Actually, I have a good way to explain it. And it's not exactly why we chose. Everybody wonders, why did we name it Lightbringer Project? But I'll start with saying that it's a nonprofit organization for the arts that serves the Pasadena community and actually students all over LA County. We're mainly known by our events in the local community, but we do the largest of our work is arts and learning programs in the schools, in underserved, diverse schools. But in the beginning, when we were searching for a title, this goes back to 1990, when we were first
Have you been there the whole time?
Yeah, oh yeah. Kind of in and out a little bit.
Well, but wait, so you're also President, CEO, and founder?
And Chief Merrymaker.
Right.
Yes, and I am a founder. I am one of the founders. There was 4 people who actually found it and founded it. So, well, let me tell you how I got involved. Start with that. Like before there was a Lightbringer Project.
Okay.
We were a twinkle in the community's eye, and so I was subletting a loft space in the Alameda district in Los Angeles. And I was always very friendly with the arts. I like to write, I still do. I always like to go to art shows and be part of performing arts events and go to small theater events. And I was living in a loft space in what is now the Arts District with a lot of people in the fashion world, people in film, and painters and sculptors. And so this was my people. I thought, this is really exciting. I want to be like them. And I loved the conversations. I loved the late hours. But at the same time, I was doing public relations for a transportation company in Irwindale. So it was a far...
Well, see, a lot of artists moonlight, right?
Exactly.
So, you know, you got to make a living so you can do your art.
It was my full-time side hustle. So every morning I would be staying up later and later. I would get in my car. I had to wear a coat and tie, God forbid, and drive to Irwindale to make my 8 o'clock show-up time, putting a tie on and shaving in the car, okay, on very little sleep. One day, after an all-night birthday party with my fellow artist friends, I showed up, went into a meeting, everybody turned around and looked at me and went like this, aghast. I looked down and I had cut myself and there was blood all over my tie.
Ouch.
Could there be a better metaphor than you need to get out of this job? So I gave 2 weeks notice. And I had always noodled around with the idea, wouldn't it be great to be part of some kind of arts movement? And I read a lot about the Dadaists and people throughout time, and I thought, here we are in Los Angeles in the late 80s or 1990. Wouldn't it be fun to, with some others, harness artist energy and bring them into the community?
So like an artist collective or cooperative?
Exactly, like an artist collective, a cooperative. We imagined something very radical, so collective was a good word to use. And then, so we kind of poked around with people, and it turns out that in that space where I was living, there was 2 other Art Center graduates. So they were Pasadena friendly. I met through someone else, I met Patricia Hurley, who is also a co-founder and has been with it for as long, Patty. And so we decided that we wanted to be an arts organization there was no mission, that we didn't have any activities, we had no constituents, and we had $10, okay? So one of the places that we used to hang out at is the Espresso Bar in Pasadena.
E-Bar.
The E-Bar, 34 North Raymond, back in the alley. And so Jervy Turvalon used to sit behind me typing his first novel, Understand This.
You've known Jervy that long?
I never spoke to him at first because I would just keep looking over my shoulder and he would kind of glare back at me, don't interrupt me. He was working on his great novel. And
it was a typewriter, not a laptop, right?
it was actually this weird model that Sony made that was like, it had a cassette tape that went back and forth. It was kind of something between a typewriter and...
It was very prehistoric.
It was cassette-y. It was very prehistoric.
Non-technological.
Non-technological. And so we had decided that the way to get rooted in the community is to really go, we did the wise thing. We went around and we spoke to what we thought of, we called them senior, older artists, and they quickly told us we're established artists. And so we went around to the established artists and took oral histories, which was really smart. So we got to know the community. And we quickly learned then, it took a serious turn where we really realized we weren't really hearing only the story of the arts through these artists' eyes, many of them who were teachers and mentors in the arts. We were really hearing the story of Pasadena over the years. And they ventured into subject matter that was, you know, arts related, and some of it wasn't. And we went to one individual who said, well, you know what's different about Pasadena is the light that falls on the arroyo. And that's why 39 artists came and became the American plein air painters. And you need to start there and search the arroyo arts and crafts movement and all the stuff I never knew existed. I was really living in an island. I had no idea. I used to go to the pub.
No, you were living in Irwindale.
I was living in Irwindale at the in the PR firm, in the transportation company. And she said it's really about the light that brought the artist here. That's why we named it Lightbringer Project. And
I've known you for a little while. I'd never heard that story before.
Yeah, I know.
But that goes to, I think, in part, the historical aspect of art and artistry here in Pasadena.
Yeah.
And also the contextual, the environmental. Because a lot of people love the arroyo and they love it for the nature that it provides and the unique features. But I don't think we talk a lot about the light that falls there.
And it's the light, and it's really golden. We really live in a golden state, and it's different than the Midwest. And I've asked people what the sunlight is like, and we've looked at pictures sometimes. There's a quality, a golden quality to the light here, and the painters knew that. And of 39 painters that painted in the arroyo, something like, they all went to the south of France because there's a similar kind of Mediterranean kind of like environment and lighting. All of them came back to Pasadena area and painted these landscape paintings that are really wonderful. So we became the Lightbringer Project, but here's a funny thing that I just found out last week. Prometheus was called the Lightbringer because when Zeus wanted to essentially eradicate humankind, Prometheus interceded and brought fire down to those who were dwelling in the dark caves and in hiding. And the reason that Prometheus in the myth brought the fire was for two reasons. One, to create optimism, to create hopefulness, and number two, to be able to create illumination and to give forth knowledge that would grow, upon which civilization would develop, particularly in the arts and those kinds of fields. So there's a whole thing about, if you read about that really relates to the arts and growth of creativity and the development of civilization. So Prometheus was the Lightbringer is what I was trying to get.
Yeah, exactly. But that's so interesting because you would think that, especially in California with climate change and
That's
fires.
not real.
Well, depending on who you ask.
It depends on who you ask.
Yeah. But the fact that we had a forest fire that ravaged tens of thousands of acres in December, I think is cause for alarm. So it's interesting that Prometheus used light as illumination as opposed to destruction.
It was not destruction, exactly. It was creation. And it was a light of creation that came down to provide knowledge and illumination so that humankind would grow its skills, abilities, develop its sense of civilization.
Well, at least it could see what it was doing.
Yeah, and it could see what they were doing, exactly, which is always really important, especially when you're living in a cave.
Yeah, so let's, of course. So let's talk a little bit more about art and community.
Okay.
And maybe give some examples of some of your larger events if you want.
Oh, that's great.
But the whole what's so fascinating about the Lightbringer project, and then what has evolved, is this notion of building community, helping people. I think in our society there's a lot of, I don't mess with you, you don't mess with me, we get along just fine.
Yeah, but stay on your side of the fence.
Right, right. We put fences between us and our homes, and we are inwardly focused on our devices, and then on our television and our screens, and so that interaction, that human touch, is not as commonplace.
That's right.
But the events that you produce and create, those force people to touch one another.
Yeah.
So how? Why did you get to that point?
Well,
and then what are some of the outcomes?
In the beginning, we started producing small events, and we had an interest in the performing arts, and because we wanted to bring people together and kind of test the water and just kind of see who we were and what it was like to do something live and in person in front of people. And then Dorothy Garcia, who's an interesting person in Pasadena, lives in Altadena. Once my fellow arts commissioner said, you know why events are important? Because they bring people together in the same place that would never be together in the same place. And I just love that. And so we embarked on that. Early on in 1993, we actually staged a very large event, the Pasadena Chalk Festival. And
that was the first year.
That was the first year.
25 years.
25 years, 26 years this year. And we didn't even know if artists were going to turn up. And in fact, we threw a party at McCormick and Schmick's, which we were talking about previous to airing. And one guy showed up. He was an artist, Yoki Nishida. I'll never forget him, and he showed up. And he was over from Japan and spoke very little English. And we had kind of a stilted conversation, but he implied he was going to paint a mural at our event. And so we always called him Artist Zero.
Oh, yeah.
And then it was really, really poorly attended, and not too many days after that, we had the first event. It had 125 artists. We were very surprised in the 95-degree heat, and we never thought there would be a second one. And they came back, and they loved it. They loved the challenge of it. They loved helping each other learn how to do it. They loved whining about it. They loved sharing chalk together. And this is very much in keeping with the tradition of street painting, where artists come together, create a community, and people can actually watch them make art, and they actually talk to people about making art. And I remember walking out on we always call it the playing field, out in front of City Hall where it was, and one of the artists saying, do we have to talk to people? I said, well, yeah, they're going to come watch you. You know, so you might want to, and they actually really liked it, but it was very, for the artists, it was something really different to be brought out in the light like that. And this is exactly what we wanted to do. When we did that event, we realized this is our mission, to gather people from all backgrounds, experiences, and cultures together to share an art experience at one time. And also to create a sense of artist community among the artists. And so 26 years later, man, 600 artists, 200 murals.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have bright ideas, and they're worried if they'll catch fire, so to speak, or if they'll have any sustainability.
Yeah.
It must be so gratifying to know that, you know, over 2 decades later, that what came from a very, very small idea is now booming.
It really is, and it's also to be associated with something that has a life of its own. We never feel like, we're kind of like the air control tower, and we keep it safe, and we kind of know what's supposed to happen when, but we never feel like we own it. We really don't feel like we own our stuff. It's successful when other people put their arms around it, and that we can serve it. And it really is gratifying, because I think it took a long time, through a lot of challenges, a lot of them financial, a lot of them just trying to get projects done and learning how to do them and finding the resources, both human and financial. When we can say at this day and time, we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Everything we're doing is what we're supposed to be doing. And what's great about that is that now our whole focus is, and we meet about this all the time, how much greater can we raise the gold standard? How much more quality can we bring, and how many more people can we include?
Yeah.
And that's what we have to think about now, not is it going to really happen?
Well, but there's sort of a rub between quantity and quality, right?
Yeah.
So the gold standard being, oh yeah, we bring 1,000 more people.
Yeah, yeah.
That's good, but what is the quality of the experience for them?
That's the thing too, and even within school programs, you try to serve more kids and go to more classes, and sometimes, you're invited in and you want to say yes because you go, okay, how great, we can be with another teacher or another school, but you have to be very careful because then where is that line where the quality is going to start to, in other words, somebody described it to me like this and said, Ron Kurosawa, who used to be in Pasadena, and he moved away, and he said, you have all these marbles on the table, and I watch organizations, and the marbles are slowly going off to the edge, but they don't realize it, and it looks really great because they have a whole bunch of marbles. So he said, be really careful what you do and only do and manage what you can do, stick to your knitting. But one thing that I really wanted to say that I think I'm really proud of is that actually, and somebody made me aware of this, we kind of created a different model without realizing it and a lot of it
And a different model of nonprofits, or a different model of service provision, or a different model of events
provision
or
and kind of community-based nonprofit, I think. Not one that's astounding and it's earth-shattering and it's like never been seen before. But in the sense that we decided from the beginning, we never wanted to be $1 million organization. We put up on a blackboard we had a consulting group, and a consulting group said these wonderful two women called the Wellspring Group, and they said, don't even think about what you're going to do, think about what your hopes are and what your fears are. Yeah. And when we went through that process, we decided we never wanted to be $1 million agency. We got close over the years, but didn't. And the reason is because we didn't want to have the obligation of some huge staff or property or buildings and a bunch of investments. We wanted
overhead.
And all that overhead. What we wanted to do was be elastic and flexible. And one of the things we decided was we should be able to do something completely brand new that somebody throws at us within 6 months. We'd be able to do it without having to look at our strategic plan and see if it is aligned. Yeah. And I'm really happy about that because an event that's coming up, LitFest Pasadena, for instance, if we hadn't had that ability to jump in, I'm not sure there'd be a LitFest Pasadena this year. And I think for a number of other times and occasions, activities and programs, we are able to jump right in. And it means you don't have a big, huge staff. It means, you don't have $1 million building or $1 million board. There's nothing wrong with that.
But the fascinating part is the impact that you have. So, I mean, if we were to count, numerically, it's literally thousands and thousands of people. Yeah. But it's fascinating. I think more the community you've built or the network you've built. So the way you're describing it, and you could do this with any of your activities with the LitFest, which is still, I think, in kind of an infancy stage.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's an adolescent.
Right, but with the other ones, it's more developed. So you have the relationship of all of the artists. Then you have the relationship of the artist to the observer, and most of the time with art, it's just a static piece on the wall. Right. Or even in the theater, but then you don't get to talk to the actors. Yeah. Or on the movie screen. Yeah. But with your events, it's interactive, participatory, and there's a deeper sort of a relationship that's
awesome.
Built.
Thank you for saying that, and that's awesome. And it's really great to know that it's really about people first and foremost, and that's who the arts are for. I've always had a thing, I think sometimes we're guilty of this sometimes in the arts community, think the arts community and different sectors stand up for themselves, and they have to, and they fight for funding and do those things. but the arts community is the entire community. It's everybody who lives in Pasadena or greater Pasadena. And so it's about the people, and it's about that. That is the best part of it, is that the relationship building is amazing. You know, and knowing you, I mean, I got to know you, and because of you, you've introduced me to all kinds of other opportunities you probably kind of aren't even conscious of, but you have. In fact, millions of other people, maybe not millions, but thousands.
Well, we don't have a whole lot more time, but let's talk about a little bit about how you impact youth, and you know, talk maybe a little bit about Room 13 and what that is.
Oh, sure.
And it's such an exciting structure.
It's really interesting because Room 13 began in 1994 in Coole, Scotland, in the Western Highlands, way up by Loch Ness, and so by Finland, and so real
almost.
quick, kind of almost
Norway,
closer than Norway. I was never good at geography, you know, but it's kind of up there in that kind of Scandinavian area. But
it's cold.
It started because it was driven by youth, because a 12-year-old girl was in a classroom in Scotland and said, "I'm really stressed, I have to leave," got up, took her books, and just walked out of the class. What she did do that nobody didn't know is she went into an empty room. It was Room 13, and she started making art and invited her friends. 2 weeks later, the maintenance of the school came in and said, "What is going on in here?" There was art all over the place, paint on the ground. And she said, "We've claimed this to be our room, Room 13. It's going to be our arts club, and we don't want any adults in the room." It was just wonderful. And the school, of course, any school would have said, "No, you're not, like you're out of here and you're expelled." But they didn't. They found that because they were making this art and they were so happy and they were talking together and learning together on their own, that they found that they were performing better in their classes, that there was no behaviors, that they weren't bored and they weren't stressed. Funny thing.
Negative behaviors.
No negative behaviors, good behaviors. And so what they did, and I'll try to make this really quick, they decided that they needed to learn more about the arts, and they asked one of the most famous artists in Scotland to come teach them, and he's a watercolorist. His name is Rob Fairley. He came and they said, "You know, we would like you to be our art teacher, our art coach, kind of an artist in residence." And he said, jokingly, "That's fine, but you have to pay me," and he left. 3 months later, they phoned him and said, "We have your salary." And they had gone to the school, told the principal, "Why don't you let us take the school photographs, give us that money, and let us hire art teachers." And Room 13 started from that girl's idea.
Yeah, and so it's so amazing that the powers that be, you know, the deciders didn't squash it in the moment.
Step it.
Because now, more than two decades later, it's flourishing globally. So the question I have about that is, how do you take a great idea and then replicate it or transmit, or what was kind of that process? Because it seems like sometimes, depending on context and resources and you know, decision makers, politicians, sometimes that's hard to do.
And systems, because you're going into, our school system is so different from the school system in Scotland or the UK or England. But the thing is that in coming here, so much of, we actually went to Scotland, and we met the kids, and we met the principals and the founder. And we met some folks who had Room 13s in South Africa and in India from Mumbai. And so we came here, and what we realized is this has to be driven by the students. So furthermore, how do you, you can't empower people. How do you create an opportunity for them to empower themselves? And it took time. We started at Elliott Middle School in Pasadena, and now Elliott Arts Magnet, and it's flourishing there now. We have a wonderful artist in residence, Leanne Shee, and we spent time with the students trying to learn what they wanted. What we did was we brought in a whole bunch of art materials and books, and we watched them, and we asked them what they were interested in. And some of them said, "What's this?" They didn't even know what these things were. Some of these things were. We showed schools of art, and we showed different kinds of art. And then we said, "What do you want?" And they might say graffiti writing, or I want animation, or I want another kind. And then what we did was we brought in community artists who were good at that, and just did a teach-in with them. And the person would sit like we're talking and say, teach them how they do it and let the kids ask questions.
So more like a workshop as opposed to a lecture?
Yes, definitely not a lecture.
Interactive,
Yes, and the Room 13s are not classes. They're, there's an artist in residence in every Room 13 who helps, who's kind of the guide who helps answer their questions and talks with them about what they want to talk about that day. Like, what should we talk about today? But the students decide on their own projects. They can work alone or with a friend or both. And they actually, they elect a management team. They decide if they want to go on field trips. Do they want to work with another?
Self-directed.
It's self-directed learning. That's actually exactly what they call it in Scotland. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to see that something could be transplanted across the ocean into our community, and you've done a fantastic job of that.
Thank you.
Just in the last few minutes we have, is there anything that you'd still like to do? Any new frontiers or?
That's so cool.
Because I think Lightbringer is so creative and so innovative. What else is there out there?
I think that's a really good question. I know that it would relate to youth. That's such a big part of our focus. I really see young people need to be in conversations with people from all kinds of different walks of life. We really broaden the definition of creativity when we apply that as an arts organization to what we do. And I feel like there needs to be something in the communication arts that involves mentorship with young people and direct conversation, because I recently just did a job prep thing at Pasadena High School. I was sitting with Scott Ward and we were talking to kids and we just realized, and then we were criticizing their resumes. And we realized they just wanted to talk and we had things to say. And I wish there's going to be a project that involves that again is about people together around the table breaking bread.
Well, I'd love to have you on again in the future.
Okay.
So that then you can tell us how it went.
Okay, we'll recap.
But I'm so glad that you were able to spend the time with us today.
That's so awesome. And Brian, you're such an asset in our community. I really mean that. It's amazing the love and dedication you bring to everybody. We do what we do because of people like you. So
yeah, well, thank you.
Sorry to get sappy.
Well, thanks very much for being here today.
Yeah, cool.